Welcome to the deep dive.
Mm.
You know, it is just incredibly easy to fall into a very specific trap at work.
Oh, absolutely. I think we've all been there.
Right? You're sitting at your desk and your inbox is just constantly refreshing. Slack or Teams is chiming like every 3 seconds.
Yeah, the endless notifications.
Exactly. And you get into the zone where your entire professional existence feels like you're just a cog in a machine.
Right.
Like your only real job, or at least the only job you actually have time for, is to just clear the inbox, to just hit the ball back over the net.
Yeah, just constantly reacting to whatever's directly in front of you.
Exactly. Well, today we have a fascinating new article from the Phoenix Performance Partners about strategic thinking development.
It's a really great piece.
It is. And our mission for this deep dive is to completely destroy a very quiet but a very damaging myth.
Right. The myth that strategic thinking is some elite privilege.
Yes. The idea that it's reserved only for the C-suite, where executives sit in these rooms with mahogany tables setting the grand strategy, while you and I we just execute it.
Yeah, that hierarchy is such a legacy mindset, and frankly, it severely limits both individual careers and overall organizational growth.
Totally.
The reframe that the Phoenix Performance Partners offer here, it just changes the entire paradigm. They argue that strategic thinking is not a job title you earn.
Right.
It is a muscle you build. And organizations that actually succeed in navigating these really complex markets, they have one thing in common.
Which is?
They grow leaders at every single level. They expect everyone from a frontline supervisor to a mid-level manager to constantly ask how their specific daily work connects to the overarching business goals.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because calling it a muscle implies a few things. It implies that anyone has the biological hardware for it, right?
Right.
And it implies that it might be weak right now if you haven't been using it, but the baseline capacity is physically there.
Exactly. You already have the equipment.
You don't need a promotion to start thinking this way. But that leads us to a pretty glaring contradiction, I think.
How so?
Well, if anyone can build this muscle, and we know it's basically the fastest way to grow your career and become an actual leader, why don't we?
Right.
Like, what actually stops a normal person from thinking strategically? Reading through the source material, I was genuinely surprised by this.
Yeah, it's counterintuitive.
It really is.
Yeah.
Because the blocker isn't intelligence. It's not a lack of, fancy MBA training. It is actually our own emotional state.
Yeah, the emotional blocker is perhaps the most misunderstood aspect of corporate psychology.
It's fascinating.
We always assume strategy is purely cognitive, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's just math. But the reality is that strategic thinking demands a willingness to pause.
Right.
And everything inside of your nervous system combined with literally every external pressure in your office is demanding immediate, visible action.
It's the urgency trap. Let's look at what that actually feels like because it's so visceral. Imagine a pilot flying a commercial jet. Suddenly, a red warning light starts flashing frantically on the dashboard. The immediate emotional impulse, the total panic response, is to just smash the button to turn the light off.
Right, just make the noise stop.
Exactly. Or immediately dive the plane to get on the ground.
Yeah.
You want to fix the flashing red light because it's stressing you out.
Of course. That's human nature.
But a trained pilot knows they have to pause. They have to scan the entire instrument panel and figure out if the engine is actually failing or if, just a single sensor is broken.
Yes, that context is everything.
But in the office, we rarely scan the instrument panel. We just smash the red button.
We absolutely do.
It's like playing an endless game of whack-a-mole. You're sweating, you're exhausted, you look super busy, but you aren't actually changing the game. You're just sprinting in the weeds, solving the exact same surface-level problems over and over again.
Because putting out a small fire feels like we're doing something productive. That pilot analogy captures the neurological reality of the workplace perfectly. When you're smashing that button, playing whack-a-mole, your brain is actually getting a hit of dopamine.
Wow, really? So we're chemically addicted to it?
Basically, yeah. Urgency feels productive. We have this deep-seated evolutionary fear of falling behind, and corporate conditioning just amplifies that.
Oh, for sure.
We are essentially trained from day one to equate motion with progress. Reacting to a crisis feels like leadership in the heat of the moment, but in reality, it's often just thoughtless execution.
But wait, I have to push back here.
Go for it.
Isn't fast action exactly what gets rewarded in most modern companies?
Wow.
I mean, if you're a normal person sitting in a cubicle, How do you justify pausing to scan the instrument panel when your boss is breathing down your neck?
It's a very real pressure.
Right. They're demanding immediate results on a quarter-end goal. If that red light is flashing and you just sit there thinking about the wiring of the plane,
Yeah.
your boss is going to assume you're freezing up. Or worse, that you just don't care.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to recognize the difference between managing optics and exercising true leadership.
Managing optics, yeah.
The source material addresses this tension directly, actually. Stepping back takes courage.
It really does.
It requires the courage to be still long enough to see clearly before you move, even when the culture around you is screaming for speed.
Which is terrifying.
It is. But if you constantly give in to the emotional addiction of constant reaction, if you just keep clearing the inbox to look busy, you will never fix the underlying systems that are causing the emergencies in the first place.
You're just treating the symptoms.
Exactly. This is an emotional shift as much as an intellectual one. A strategic thinker has to learn to tolerate the temporary discomfort of not moving
Right.
and the social discomfort of not appearing frantically busy just so they can actually diagnose reality.
That is a massive paradigm shift. You are actively fighting your own brain's addiction to the adrenaline of motion.
Precisely.
You literally have to force yourself to take your hands off the controls for a second.
Yeah.
But the article points out that the moment you find the courage to pause, you immediately run into your next massive hurdle.
And this one is entirely internal.
Right, it's your own psychological wiring.
Yes. We shift here from the external pressures of the office to our internal unconscious defaults.
Defaults, right?
The Phoenix Performance Partners identify 4 unconscious default patterns that keep us stuck in the weeds. And what is critical to understand is that everyone, literally everyone, naturally gravitates toward at least one of these under stress.
Let's break these down, because realizing which one you default to is honestly a little unnerving.
Can be a rude awakening, yeah.
So the first pattern they mention is the control default.
Right. So when a person whose default is control faces a complex problem, their baseline instinct is to take charge immediately.
Just grab the wheel.
Exactly. The issue is that they leap to solutions before they actually understand the system they were trying to change. The anxiety of an unresolved problem is just so high for them that they force a quick fix, which often ends up breaking something else downstream.
Because they just couldn't sit with the ambiguity.
Right. They are optimizing for a feeling of agency over actual effectiveness.
But what if you aren't a control freak? Like, what if your anxiety under stress manifests entirely differently, like being a people pleaser?
That is extremely common.
That brings us to the second default, which the article calls connection. I imagine that completely changes how you sabotage your own strategic thinking.
Radically. If your wiring is connection, your primary directive is keeping the social fabric intact.
Right.
You end up optimizing for consensus over truth. So in a strategic meeting, a connection default leader will dodge the hard trade-offs.
They don't want to be the bad guy.
Exactly. They'll water down their recommendations or avoid making a definitive cut entirely because those decisions might upset someone or create friction.
Wow.
And strategy, fundamentally, requires making choices that will undoubtedly disappoint someone.
That sounds somewhat similar to the third pattern, the harmony default.
Yeah.
But the text makes a pretty distinct separation between optimizing for consensus and just, like, wanting to keep your head down.
Yeah, they are distinct. The connection default is about relationships and pleasing individuals.
Okay.
The harmony default is about avoiding disruption to the environment itself.
I see.
If your default is harmony, you might not necessarily care if people like you, but you desperately want to avoid rocking the boat.
So what do you do?
You retreat into the familiar. You stay incredibly busy with safe, routine tasks, entirely avoiding the massive structural questions that are actually threatening the business.
Oh, wow. You essentially busy yourself formatting the margins of a spreadsheet while the hull of the ship is taking on water.
That's a perfect way to put it.
You're working hard, but the opportunity cost of that micromanagement is just devastating.
It really is.
And that ties directly into the fourth and final pattern, which is the accuracy default. And I have to say, I see this one everywhere in tech and finance.
Oh, it's rampant in those industries.
Right.
The accuracy default is the trap of precision.
Right.
When stressed, these individuals completely disappear into the data. They demand more analytics, more research, and perfect certainty before they're willing to make a single move.
Analysis paralysis.
Exactly. They lose the forest for the trees. They become so obsessed with getting the minutia flawlessly correct that they completely lose sight of the overarching business objective.
I always think of the accuracy default like looking at a digital map on your phone.
Okay, how so?
Well, you zoom in so incredibly far that you can clearly see the location of a single trash can on a specific street corner,
Right,
like rendered in high definition.
right.
You are completely accurate about that trash can, but you have absolutely no idea what city you're in. You
Yes,
totally lost the context.
that is exactly what happens.
But here's the practical question. If I am a control person, for example, and I know my biological instinct is to jump to a solution and just get things done,
Hmm.
how do I actually catch myself in the heat of a meeting before I wreck the system?
What's fascinating here is that the text explicitly states these defaults are not character flaws.
Okay, that's a relief.
Right. They're simply unconscious patterns running the show. You do not need to spend 10 years in therapy rewiring your entire personality to become a strategic thinker.
So what's the fix?
The mandatory first step is just metacognition,
Yeah.
simply naming the default in real time.
Wait, like just calling it out to yourself?
Yes, merely naming it strips it of its unconscious power.
Really? Just naming it?
Yeah, when you can sit in a meeting and silently say to yourself, I am rushing to implement this software patch because my default is control, and I feel anxious when this project timeline is unresolved.
Oh, okay.
Doing that creates a tiny cognitive gap between the impulse and the action.
I love that, a cognitive gap.
And that gap is the exact space where strategic thinking happens. Understanding how your default shapes your perception is the foundation of any real leadership transformation.
It's like turning on a flashlight in a dark, cluttered room.
Mm.
The furniture hasn't moved. You still have the urge to control or to please,
Yeah.
but now you aren't going to blindly trip over the coffee table because you can actually see it.
Exactly. You have the awareness.
So you've taken the pause, you've identified your unconscious default, and created that gap. Now, how do you actively exercise this muscle?
Right, the execution phase.
Yeah, the source lays out a very practical framework for doing this, starting with how we perceive the problem in the first place.
The first phase of this framework is to aggressively zoom out.
Zoom out.
Before you even attempt to touch the problem in front of you, you have to ask what larger goal this situation sits inside.
Okay.
You have to name the broader system, not just your specific department's slice of it. The article notes that the vast majority of catastrophic corporate decisions come from solving the piece while missing the whole.
Right, because if you only look at your specific project, you might optimize it perfectly for your team.
Yeah.
But in doing so, you might be completely sub-optimizing the entire organization. You have to define the borders of the sandbox you are actually playing in.
Beautifully said.
And once you've zoomed out to see the whole system, you are inevitably going to see how your team interact with all the others. Which brings us to the next step, tracing the connections.
In any complex organization, nothing exists in isolation.
Right.
So once you define the system, you must trace the threads. You have to ask, if I manipulate this variable right here, what else does this touch?
It is exactly like plucking a strand on a giant spider web.
Oh, that's a great visual.
Right. You tap the bottom left corner of the web, and instantly the top right corner vibrates. You cannot just isolate one piece of the web and pretend the rest of the structure is static.
You really can.
Like if you launch a massive promotion to solve a marketing problem, the sales team's web vibrates with unqualified leads. The IT department's web vibrates because the servers crash from the traffic spikes. Everything's connected.
That analogy hits at the core of systems thinking. Anticipating those vibrations, what we call second-order consequences, is exactly what separates a strategic thinker from a reactor.
The reactor.
A reactor only sees the piece of the web they are touching, and then they get frustrated when things inexplicably break downstream.
Because they didn't look up.
Right. But a strategic thinker traces the threads and anticipates how the structural integrity of the entire web is going to shift.
Okay, so mapping the web and seeing the second-order consequences is incredibly valuable.
It is.
But eventually, you can't just stare at the board forever playing out theoreticals, right?
Yeah.
You actually have to pull a lever. You have to make a move.
You do.
And this transitions us right into the execution phase of the framework, making the choice.
This is where strategy moves from theory to reality, and honestly, where it gets intensely difficult for a lot of people.
Why is that?
Because you have to name the real choice. A true strategy is not a comprehensive to-do list where you just try to accomplish everything.
Right.
It is a set of deliberate, painful trade-offs.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The text anchors this concept with a quote from Michael Porter, the legendary business strategist.
Oh, I love this quote.
He says, "The essence of strategy is choosing what not to do."
Choosing what not to do. It sounds so elegant in a textbook, doesn't it?
It really does.
But in practice, it goes against literally every corporate instinct we have to try and capture every market, build every feature, and appease every stakeholder.
We just want to say yes to everything.
Exactly. You have to clarify what you are actually deciding between. And the framework insists you must state those trade-offs out loud.
Okay, I have to push back on the reality of doing that in an actual office.
Fair enough.
Because saying no and choosing what not to do is genuinely terrifying.
It is.
Especially if you don't have the word chief or executive in your title. Let's say you're a mid-level product manager.
Okay.
How do you actually look your boss in the eye and state a trade-off out loud without sounding insubordinate? Or like you just lack the hustle to get everything done?
It is a very valid fear, but this is where the previous steps save you.
How so?
Stating trade-offs isn't about folding your arms and refusing to work. It is about illuminating reality for the rest of the team.
Illuminating reality.
If you have genuinely zoomed out and traced the connections on the web, you aren't saying no just to be difficult. You are saying no to protect the larger system.
Right.
You change the conversation from a debate about effort, like how hard you're working, to a debate about physics.
Ah, I love that. So instead of saying, I don't have time to do that, you reframe it around the system's capacity.
Exactly. You provide the stark choice. You say, if we say yes to rushing this custom feature for one client, we are actively saying no to the platform stability that serves our other 10,000 clients.
That is so powerful.
Or if we say yes to this aggressive Q3 marketing push, we are saying no to the product development timeline because engineering will have to pivot to support the launch.
Right. You're making the invisible costs visible.
Yes. You aren't avoiding work. You are making those hidden costs glaringly obvious to the leadership team.
You are forcing the room to acknowledge that they cannot magically have their cake and eat it too.
Exactly.
You are naming the real choice so the business can actually steer, rather than just drifting into chaos.
Yeah.
And that leads directly into the final piece of the framework, playing it forward.
Right. Once you name the trade-off, you have to walk the decision 2 or 3 moves ahead.
Okay.
Ask what happens immediately next and what happens 6 months after that.
Anticipating the cascading consequences before you commit capital or resources.
Yes.
The source actually emphasizes that playing it forward isn't just an extra precaution. It is the whole game.
It really is.
Like, think about Blockbuster Video choosing not to acquire Netflix.
Oh, classic example.
They didn't play the board forward to see how bandwidth speeds were going to eventually change consumer habits.
They were just looking at the immediate term.
Right. If you can play a decision out in your mind, factoring in the trade-offs and the ripples across the entire web, you have successfully engaged the strategic muscle, regardless of where you sit in the org chart.
That's exactly it.
So what does this all mean?
Wow.
If we take a step back and look at the whole arc of this deep dive, the ultimate shift we are talking about is moving from someone who merely reacts to their environment to someone who actively designs it.
Beautifully said.
You stop being the panic pilot, smashing the flashing red button, and you become the person who scans the instrument panel, understands the wiring of the plane, and navigates the storm.
Yes.
When that shift happens, and when it is repeated and encouraged at every single level of a company, that is how an organization builds a genuine, resilient leadership pipeline instead of a permanent talent shortage.
It democratizes leadership.
It really does.
It removes the mystical aura around strategy and replaces it with a tangible set of mental habits that anyone can adopt today in whatever role they currently occupy.
It really is incredibly empowering. So we want to pass on a direct challenge to you, the listener.
Absolutely.
Take these concepts out of the theoretical. Pick one specific situation, one frustrating problem you are facing at work this week.
Just one.
And before you immediately act on it, just to get it off your plate, run it through this sequence. First, zoom out and define the actual system you're operating in.
Right.
Second, trace the threads to see what else your solution is going to touch.
Cluck the web.
Exactly. Third, name the choice and clarify the painful trade-off you have to make. And fourth, play it forward to see where that choice leaves you 3 moves from now.
It's a game changer.
Remember, you do not need a mahogany table or a bigger title to think like a leader. You just need the courage to stop reacting and step back.
This raises an important question, though, and it is something I want to leave you with to mull over as you head back to work.
Oh, it's...
We have established that anyone can build this muscle. But what happens if they actually do? If everyone at every level of an organization suddenly started thinking 3 moves ahead.
That would be wild.
Right. If frontline workers and middle managers were constantly seeing the whole board, understanding the second order consequences, and loudly choosing what not to do based on the larger system,
Right.
would the traditional top-down corporate hierarchy even make sense anymore? Could this level of decentralized, widespread strategic thinking eventually make the traditional C-suite entirely obsolete?